Thank you very much. I must open with a confession. I'm here to represent the left brain academics, so that we're not totally underrepresented. I have spent, as John mentioned, all my life helping people make decisions. Choices, big and small, big corporate mergers and product launches and investments, and small but very significant personal decisions has been the story of my professional life. And in doing that, I realize that when we make choices, we are constrained, we're restrained by blocks that we impose on ourselves. There is much to the limitations we have in what we do that we do to ourselves, self-inflicted. For example, in sports, it is very interesting how records are broken, and then all of a sudden everybody can do what the other person did. So for example, the 100-meter dash, doing that in less than 10 seconds. For a while, that was insurmountable. All of a sudden somebody does it, and then everybody does it. Why? Why couldn't we have done it before? Or the 4-minute mile. Can't do the 4-minute mile. All of a sudden it does, and then all of a sudden, after it was a world record, doing the mile in less than 4 minutes, high school kids are doing it. Why couldn't they have done it before? Did we all of a sudden sort of get a flash of new muscles or a new technique? No. We're just not letting ourselves do it. So I'd like to tell you about how we block ourselves. And I have built what I call a taxonomy of ignorance. That is a classification of how we prevent ourselves from acting and from deciding in ways that can be overcome simply by understanding better, by new knowledge or just an insight of how to do it. So I begin with what I consider to be the lightest form of ignorance, and the block is computational. Computational block is if only I had a faster computer, or I had more memory, or somehow an ability to compute. Like take for example, the equation that is on the bottom of this slide. Hope you all can see it from back. It's very simple to state, but most of us have no idea what the answer is. Yet, if only we had a computer, if only we had the computing resources, we could answer this question. We know how to do it. It's just a matter of being able to crunch the numbers. That I consider to be the lightest version, a block that prevents us from acting. We just don't know the answer, but we know how to get it. But let's go a little bit deeper to what I refer to as Watsonian ignorance, the Watsonian block. You know, Sherlock Holmes and Watson, or if you watch House, the students or his employees, they play the same role as Watson. What's interesting about Watson and Sherlock Holmes is that they are both exposed to the same information. Yet one of them figures it out and the other one doesn't. Why is it that Sherlock Holmes can figure out what happens, how the crime was committed, and Watson, who is there and in a way represents us as we read the book, and we identify with Watson, we can't figure it out, but Sherlock Holmes does. Same thing with House. His employees are exposed to the same information that he is, but it is he who can figure out the puzzle. This is true for all of medicine, for example, all of medical diagnostics. It is a matter, it's not that you know how to solve the problem, that you understand how to do it, but rather that you know or don't know what to focus on. It's a matter of focusing rather than a matter simply of computing. Let's get a little bit deeper into these blocks that we do on ourselves, and learn about Claudius Ptolemaeus, who we know as Ptolemy. Ptolemy, in the first century of the Common Era, came up with a set of tables that described the solar system and the planets as a set of circular orbits around the Earth. Because we see the planets go around the Earth. We saw everything from the point of view of the Earth. But there was a problem. And the problem, something that we cannot see very easily today, but if we had the time and we had the darkness necessary for it, we would see that the planets sometimes go backwards. That is called retrograde motion. And then they keep going forwards. And so to deal with that particular phenomenon, Ptolemy came up with the notion of an epicycle. In other words, a cycle on top of a cycle. And so you see that the orbits have these little epicycles. And sometimes the epicycle makes the planet go backwards. Notice that, by the way, planets are not going around the Earth. They have a funny orbit that's a wiggly thing around the circle, but a circle on top of a circle. And over time, more phenomena were discovered that required additional epicycles on top of the epicycles. So it became a morass of epicycles on top of epicycles, all of which was espoused very, very strongly by the church, who was dominant in Europe and in all of the colonies of Europe. And so everybody, including Christopher Columbus, believed in this structure of the universe. But it was right after Columbus that this Polish priest called Nicholas Copernicus came up with a different. He's looking at the tables and he's looking. He says, "Wait a minute, this doesn't work. Really, what's happening is that all the planets, including the Earth, are going around the sun," which didn't please the church because it didn't put humans at the center of everything. It didn't please Copernicus. He was a very religious man, came from a very religious family. In fact, he was a part of the clergy. But nonetheless, this is what the math told him. Now here's the question. Who was right? Was Ptolemy wrong? Or was he right? And a way to think about it is they're both right. There's nothing wrong about the Ptolemaic system except that it's awkward. It's hard to work with. The rules of Ptolemy, the way the mechanics of the solar system worked, were a large set of exceptions and complicated rules and tables. Whereas Copernicus led to a very simple description, and that eventually led to Newtonian mechanics. Three or four very, very simple rules for how the world works, basic physics. So it's not that Ptolemy was wrong. It is just that the way of thinking that Copernicus led just made the process simpler. And it's a little bit like trying to make arithmetic with Arabic numerals, to try to multiply 105 by 77. Anybody in this room can do it. Try to do it with Roman numerals. It's incredibly awkward. Is one right and the other one wrong? No, they're both right. They're just different. The Arabic numerals have this concept of zero, which is kind of convenient. But they're both right. Now imagine that there are geniuses who are very, very good at multiplying with Roman numerals. And all of a sudden, a 10-year-old comes around and starts multiplying more quickly and more accurately with Arabic numerals. Is this 10-year-old a genius, a super genius? Well, maybe. But really, he has a much better language. It's the same comparison as there was between Ptolemy and Copernicus, the heliocentric system versus the geocentric system, sun versus earth as the center. Same thing here. Same thing happened with the internet, with browsers. Netscape was a major revolution. I had access to the internet, and many of you did too, when it was called the ARPANET, and it was all basically text, and you need to know IP addresses and all sorts of things. And then all of a sudden it becomes point and click and graphical. What changed? Did the internet change? No. All of a sudden there was a different language. And then you had all of these suits in, executives talking about HTTP. All of a sudden they know about www. And it was just fascinating for us who had been in that world for a long time. All of a sudden these very high-level executives are speaking Unix. So that's Ptolemaic. Let's go one level deeper, and that is to the Gordian block. Who knows about the Gordian Knot? Gordius was the king of Phrygia. Phrygia was in what now we call Turkey, next to Anatolia, what used to be called Anatolia. It's in Turkey. And Gordius was a farmer who just happened to be blessed by the oracles or whatever, and whenever he walked into Phrygia, he was named the king, and he had an ox-driven cart, and he tied his ox cart to a pole or something like that, the legend goes, with a not so elaborate and complicated that the oracle, maybe the same one or some other oracle, said that whoever unties that knot will become ruler of Asia. It's interesting because Alexander the Great came later and cut the knot. And by the way, he did become ruler of Asia. Did he untie the knot? Well, depends how you define. Nobody said you couldn't cut it. And he did untie it, he just did it with a sword. By the way, this whole thing was made highly popular by Alexander the Great's publicists, so there's a bit of an issue here. But there's another example, Columbus's egg. Columbus was in the middle of the trip across what we now call the Atlantic Ocean, and all of a sudden he starts running out of water. By the way, there's many versions of this legend. There's a version that doesn't even include Columbus. It includes Brunelleschi, the architect. But the most famous legend is about Columbus. He's on his ship. His crew starts complaining that there's not enough water. They're being rationed. Drinking water, of course. There's water in the ocean. But drinking water. And he says, okay, I challenge you to stand an egg on its end. Either end. Anybody who can will get double rations. And of course people tried and they couldn't. Columbus comes around. Oh, and by the way, they weren't trying to put an egg in a room like this. They're trying to stand an egg on a ship that's going like this. A little tiny ship in the middle of the ocean. So Columbus comes in and taps the egg and creates a little flat surface on the fat side of the fat end of the tip, where there's air, and he stands the egg for a few seconds. Did he stand the egg? Just like Alexander the Great, did he cut the knot? Interesting. Star Trek, if anybody has seen The Wrath of Khan, there's the first scene. It's called the Kobayashi Maru maneuver, in which it turns out to be a simulation that is designed to be unwinnable. But the only person who's ever won it, because cadets in training take this Kobayashi Maru simulation to see if they can handle it. But the only person who's ever won it is Captain Kirk, who is now an admiral. And it turns out that Captain Kirk won it because he came in the night before and reprogrammed the simulation so that it could be won. Again, was it possible? Did he win the simulation? These are rules that we impose on ourselves. The same thing happened with the Macintosh. It was this big thing, cost $100,000 for the machine and who knows how much for the software developed by Xerox PARC. Out comes Steve Jobs and figures that, and everybody told him it was impossible what he was doing. But he came out with a $2,000 version of the same thing that everybody could buy, and it changed the world. So, the question I have is, did Alexander the Great cut the knot, Columbus stand the egg, Captain Kirk solve the Kobayashi Maru situation, and did Steve Jobs create this, this machine that did everything that the Xerox PARC machine did? And the answer is yes and no. We are blocked by our own rules. We have our own, we impose constraints on ourselves. And I see that blocking good decision making all over the place because we don't see the world in a way that where we can solve the problem. Here, it is not even so much, it's not that you can't compute, it's not that you need to focus, it's not that you have the wrong language, but it is that you are bound yourself by rules that you impose on yourself. And they don't have to be. The next one is magical, Stradivarius versus aspirin. Stradivarius, nobody knows how it works. Most medicines in the world, nobody knows how they work. But we know they work. There is something fundamentally in there, in a Stradivarius, that we don't understand. And the block there is simply, how do we know about a Stradivarius? I don't know how to break that one. Maybe someday we'll know. The next level is dark, where everything is, the whole thing is magical. And my example is life. Nobel Prize winning biologists can tell you when something is alive and when something isn't. But none of them has any idea what life is. The last block is fundamental. Fundamental is when you don't know that you have a problem. You don't even know that you have a problem. And for me, the best example is global warming. Up until 2 or 3 years ago, we didn't even know about this. My example before global warming was sun tanning. We all were sun tanning, we didn't know about UV rays. We're all happy getting cancer. Now we don't. The take-away concept is that once somebody solves the problem, once you figure out how to do it, everybody can do it. Once we figure out how to run the 4-minute mile under 4 minutes, the mile under 4 minutes, everybody can do it. Well, and not me, but athletes, young and old. It's no longer a record. It's no longer a barrier anymore. And why is it that before it was a barrier? With that, thank you.